You're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through your investment app, wondering if you're completely screwed. Your college roommate just posted about their early retirement plan on Facebook. Your coworker keeps talking about their cryptocurrency gains. And you're sitting there at 47 thinking, I should have started this 20 years ago. Here's the thing they're missing. You're probably doing way better than you think. There are 7 signs that prove you're on track to retire early, even when it feels like you're barely keeping your head above water. Some of these signs are obvious. Others are so subtle that most people miss them completely. But if you're hitting even 4 or 5 of these markers, you're in better shape than 90% of Americans your age. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps clarify things for you. Let's dive into the signs, starting with the most straightforward one. If you're consistently putting away 15% or more of your gross income, you've already crossed the threshold that separates people who coast into traditional retirement from people who retire early. This isn't the standard 10% advice your HR department throws around. That 10% gets you to 65 if you're lucky. 15% gets you out the door at 55 or earlier. Here's why this number matters so much. When you save 15% starting in your 30s or 40s, compound interest doesn't just work for you. It accelerates like a snowball rolling down a mountain. Every dollar you put away today is worth exponentially more than a dollar you put away at 60. The math is brutal and beautiful at the same time. Let's say you're 42 and you start saving 15% of a $70,000 salary. That's $10,500 a year. Over 23 years until you're 65, assuming a 7% return, you're looking at over $600,000. But here's the kicker. If you want to retire at 55 instead, that same 15% rate still gets you close to $400,000. Add in whatever you've already saved, and you're in striking distance of financial independence. The psychological shift that happens when you hit this savings rate is massive. You stop thinking, I'm just getting by. You start thinking, I'm building wealth. That identity change is worth more than the actual dollars because it affects every financial decision you make going forward. Now, I know what you're thinking. 15% feels impossible when you're drowning in mortgage payments, car loans, and your kids' orthodontist bills. But if you're already doing it, even if it feels like you're eating ramen for the rest of the week, that's the sign. You've crossed the line. Most people say they save 15%. Research shows the actual number is closer to 6%. If you're genuinely hitting 15, you're already in rare company. Here's where things get interesting. Forget about comparing your net worth to your income. That's the wrong metric entirely. The real measure of financial security is whether your net worth equals at least 1 year of your expenses, not your salary, your expenses. If you spend $50,000 annually and you have $50,000 in liquid assets, you've hit what I call walking away money. This is the first major psychological milestone that separates you from the paycheck to paycheck crowd. And I'm not talking about people who are literally broke. I'm talking about people making 6 figures who still can't sleep at night because they know one bad month would wreck them. Let me break down why this number matters so much. When you have 1 year of expenses saved, you stop living in constant financial panic mode. You can finally breathe. It's like having financial air in your lungs for the first time in decades. Your car breaks down? Annoying, but not catastrophic. You get laid off. Scary, but you have 12 months to figure it out. Your kid needs braces? Fine, we'll handle it. The identity shift that happens when you cross this threshold is massive. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's barely holding it together. You start seeing yourself as someone with options. And that mental shift changes everything about how you approach money going forward. Here's the mistake most people make. They look at their net worth and compare it to their annual income. So, someone making $80,000 thinks they need $80,000 saved to hit this milestone. But if they only spend $55,000, they actually need $55,000. That's a $25,000 difference in how soon they reach this psychological safety net. I'll be honest. This number feels both massive and tiny depending on what day you check your account. Some mornings you wake up and think, I have a whole year of freedom sitting there. Other mornings you think, that's it. 1 year? What happens in year 2? But if you've hit this milestone, especially if you're still in your 40s or 50s, you're way ahead of most Americans. The average person your age has maybe 3 months of expenses saved. You have 12. That gap compounds faster than you think because now you're making decisions from a position of strength instead of desperation. But here's where it gets really interesting. The next signs are less about the numbers and more about behavior. And this one is huge. If you've stopped financing depreciating assets, you've made a wealth-building decision that most Americans never make. Let me define what I mean by depreciating assets. Cars, boats, motorcycles, electronics, furniture. Anything that loses value the second you buy it. And financing these things? That's wealth destruction on a payment plan. Here's what kills me. There's this phenomenon I call automotive Stockholm syndrome. People will defend their car payment like it's a family member. They'll say things like, "But I need reliable transportation." Or, "The interest rate was only 5%. Or, my personal favorite, "I'm building equity." No, you're not. Your car lost 15% of its value the moment you drove it off the lot. Let me show you the real cost. Say you finance a $40,000 vehicle over 5 years at 6% interest. You're paying $47,000 total. That's $7,000 in interest alone. But here's the part that blows people's minds. That same $7,000 invested at 7% over 20 years becomes $27,000. You didn't just lose $7,000, you lost $27,000 in future wealth. Now contrast that with someone who buys a $15,000 used car with cash. Same reliability, same transportation, but they're investing that monthly payment instead of sending it to a bank. Over 5 years, that's a $32,000 swing in net worth between these two people. Same income, different trajectory. The boulder up the hill metaphor fits perfectly here. Monthly payments feel manageable until you realize they never end. You finish paying off the car, and what do most people do? They immediately finance another one. It's a cycle that keeps you broke no matter how much you earn. Breaking this cycle requires overcoming a psychological addiction to affordable monthly payments. We've been trained to think in terms of monthly payments instead of total cost. Can you afford $400 a month? Sure. Can you afford $47,000 for a car? That sounds insane. But it's the same thing. If you've broken this habit, if you're buying used cars with cash or driving paid-off vehicles while your coworkers are signing up for 7-year loans, that's a massive sign you're on track. It feels judgmental to say this, but it's purely mathematical. Every dollar you're not sending to a car payment is a dollar that's compounding toward your early retirement. I know someone's going to comment, "But I love my truck." Great. Love it on your own dime, not the bank's. The people who retire early aren't the ones with the nicest cars in the parking lot. They're the ones still driving the paid-off sedan while quietly building wealth nobody sees. Now, let's talk about the behavior that separates early retirees from everyone else. It's not about how much you make, it's about what you do when you start making more. Lifestyle inflation is the silent killer of early retirement. You get a raise, you immediately upgrade your life. Bigger apartment, nicer car, fancier restaurants, that vacation you've been putting off. Within 3 months, you're spending every penny of that raise and wondering why you don't feel any richer. Here's the psychological trap. You tell yourself, "I've been grinding for years. I deserve this." And you're not wrong. You do deserve it. But the question is, what do you deserve more? That upgraded lifestyle now or financial freedom in 10 years? Early retirees have a completely different automatic response to income increases. When they get a $10,000 raise, at least 50% goes straight to savings. $5,000 to the retirement account, maybe another $1,000 to taxable investments, and the rest gets absorbed into their existing lifestyle. They're not saints. They're not depriving themselves. They're just wired differently. Let me walk you through a specific example. You're making $70,000 and saving 15%. That's $10,500 in annual savings. You get promoted and now you're making $80,000. The typical American response? Upgrade the car lease, move to a nicer place, start eating out more. Within 6 months, they're saving the same $10,500, just on a higher income. But if you're someone who automatically bumps that savings rate, you're now saving 15% of $80,000. That's $12,000 annually. You just added $1,500 in annual savings without even thinking about it. That 1,500 compounds to over $60,000 over 20 years at 7% returns. The real magic happens when you take it further. You save 50% of that $10,000 raise. Now you're saving $15,500 annually instead of $10,500. That $5,000 difference becomes nearly $200,000 over 20 years. This is what I mean by an identity shift. You don't see yourself as a consumer who earns money to spend it. You see yourself as a wealth builder who earns money to buy freedom. Every raise is another brick in the foundation of your early retirement. Here's where the social pressure gets brutal. You get promoted, and suddenly your coworkers are asking why you're still driving the same car. Your family is wondering why you're not moving to a bigger house. Your friends expect you to start picking up the tab more often. The world around you is screaming, "You make more now. Act like it." But you know what's actually happening? You're compounding your way to freedom while they're compounding their way to working until 70. They'll look successful at 50. You'll be retired at 55. If you're someone who instinctively routes raises to savings before lifestyle upgrades, that's one of the strongest signs you're on track. This behavior compounds faster than any investment return because it's both increasing your savings rate and preventing lifestyle creep at the same time. Here's where the mental shift gets really interesting. Most people think about retirement as an age. I'll retire at 65, maybe 62 if I'm lucky. The system has trained us to think this way because it's how Social Security works, how pension plans work, how everything works. But people who retire early think completely differently. They don't think about retirement age. They think about financial independence. And the question isn't, when can I retire? It's when will my assets cover my expenses? This is where the 4% rule comes in. It's the framework that early retirees use to reverse engineer their freedom. The rule says you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually without running out of money. So if you need $50,000 a year to live, you need $1.25 million invested. That number probably just made your stomach drop. 1.25 million sounds impossible, but here's what changes when you start thinking this way. Every financial decision becomes a calculation toward that number. Do I really need this expense? Because cutting $5,000 in annual spending means I need $125,000 less to retire. Suddenly, you're not just saving money. You're buying years of your life back. That's the mental shift that changes everything. You're not sacrificing. You're not depriving yourself. You're making a trade. Spend less now. Retire years earlier. Traditional retirement planning focuses entirely on age. How much do I need by 65? What will Social Security pay me? When can I access my 401k without penalties? It's all backward-looking from an arbitrary finish line. Financial independence thinking flips it completely. You work backward from freedom. I need this much to cover my expenses. At my current savings rate and expected returns, I'll hit that number at this age. Now, every decision either moves that date closer or pushes it further away. Let me give you a specific example. Say you're 45, you have $300,000 saved, you're saving $25,000 annually, and you need $50,000 a year to live. Assuming 7% returns, you'll hit $1.25 million at age 58. That's your freedom number, not 65, 58. But here's where it gets wild. If you cut your annual expenses to $45,000, you only need $1.125 million. That moves your retirement date to 56. You just bought yourself 2 years of freedom by cutting $5,000 in annual spending. Most people in their 40s don't think this way. They're still locked into the age-based model because that's what everyone around them uses. But if you've made this mental shift, if you're calculating your financial independence number instead of just hoping you'll have enough by 65, that's a massive sign you're on track. I joke with my wife that when HR asks about my retirement plans, I'm going to say Tuesday. They're expecting a year. I'm giving them a date. Because that's how people who retire early think. It's not about reaching an age, it's about reaching a number. And once you hit that number, you're done. Whether that's 55, 52, or, Tuesday. Let's talk about the wealth-building accelerator that nobody wants to discuss, because it involves admitting you made mistakes. If you've eliminated high-interest debt and you actively avoid taking on new debt, you've removed the single biggest obstacle to early retirement. High-interest debt is compound interest working against you. Every dollar you pay in credit card interest at 18% is a dollar that could be compounding at 7% in your favor. That's a 25% swing in your financial trajectory. It's brutal math. Here's what happens when you eliminate debt. That $500 monthly credit card payment doesn't disappear. It becomes a $500 monthly investment. Over 15 years at 7% returns, that's $150,000. You didn't just pay off debt. You unlocked a six-figure retirement account. The financial foundation metaphor fits perfectly here. You can't build wealth on a cracked base. If you're paying 18% interest on credit cards while trying to earn 7% in the market, you're running uphill in quicksand. Eliminating that debt is like finally reaching solid ground. There's so much shame and secrecy around debt that people don't talk about what an achievement it is to get out. If you've paid off your credit cards, your personal loans, your stupid furniture financing from 6 years ago, that's massive. You've done something most Americans never do. But here's the harder part. Avoiding new debt requires saying no to things that feel completely normal. Your friends finance their vacation. Your coworkers finance new furniture. Your neighbors finance their backyard renovation. And you're sitting there paying cash or not doing it at all. I love when credit card companies send those "we miss you" letters after you pay off your balance. They're literally mourning the loss of your interest payments. That's how you know you won. If you've broken the debt cycle, you're not just on track to retire early. You've removed the emergency brake that keeps most people stuck until 65. Here's the most counterintuitive sign of all. If you constantly feel behind on your retirement savings, you're probably way ahead. This is the paradox nobody talks about. The people on track to retire early are often the most anxious about money. I call this financial imposter syndrome. You're saving 15%, your net worth is growing, you've eliminated debt, and you still lie awake at 3 in the morning running compound interest calculations in your head. Meanwhile, your coworker who hasn't checked their 401k balance in 5 years is sleeping like a baby. Here's why this happens. High savers are hyper-aware of every dollar. You notice when you spend $12 on lunch because that's $12 that's not compounding. You feel guilty about buying coffee because you know that $5 daily is $125,000 over 30 years at 7% returns. This level of financial consciousness feels exhausting. But here's the thing. People who are actually behind don't feel this way. They feel fine because they're not paying attention. They're not running the numbers. They're not comparing their savings rate to their goals. They're just hoping it works out. Research shows that financial anxiety is highest among disciplined savers. The people doing everything right are the ones who worry the most. It's completely backward, but it makes sense. You care enough to track your progress, which means you're aware of every gap between where you are and where you want to be. The social media comparison trap makes this worse. You see 30-year-old crypto millionaires and feel inadequate at 47. You see early retirement bloggers who saved 70% of their income and think you're failing at 15%, but you're comparing your middle to someone else's highlight reel. If you're worried you're behind, you're probably ahead. The fact that you're even asking the question means you're paying attention. And paying attention is the real predictor of early retirement, especially if you realize how little people actually have saved for retirement, which you can learn about in this next video.